Hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our last Reconciliation Victoria Truth Telling in Education webinar of the year. Super exciting. We're really happy to have you all joining us. As we normally do, just as you're coming into the webinar, if you could pop your country, the country that you're on currently, in the chat so we can just get an idea of where everyone is coming from. I am Sarah Joyce. I'm the Education Officer at Reconciliation Victoria, and I am currently on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country. And joining us today is Kobi, who is, I believe, on Bunurong country.
I am. Thank you.
Excellent.
I'm super excited for everyone to come along today and be a part of this webinar. I think it's going to be really exciting to have some of the conversations that we want to teach you about, and I guess our history and things like that, which I think is really important. I first would like to start off by saying thank you and good afternoon. My name's Kobi Sainty, and I'm a Bunurong traditional owner of the lands of where I stand today, and I acknowledge anyone who's on any other countries. I would first like to pay respects to my elders past, present and emerging as they walk in the footsteps of our ancestors who have walked in the lands of where we are today. For tens of thousands of years, we have welcomed many different tribes, communities and clans onto our land to respect their path and their journey, but for them to respect us and our land. Throughout the years of respectful communications between tribes, there have been developments of strong bonds and strong relationships between our mobs. With saying that, I would like to give you a warm, respectful welcome as you walk the path and start your journey for today. I just ask that you respect our mother, the land, and Bunjil, our great creative spirit, our father. Sharing these moments together will create strong bonds and relationships for both of our communities to grow and for the future generations to come. So Womanjika, Wadayoyo, Wantalong, Bunurong, Beak Beak. Welcome to beautiful Bunurong country. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobi. Just if anyone's joining us now, we really encourage you to pop the country that you're on in the chat so we can all see where everyone's at. Just going to play a welcome to country video that Kobi has generously shared with us.
And any elders here with us today. I also pay my respects to the land where we are standing on today, which is our mother, and Bunjil, the great creator spirit, our father. Womanjinka, Wadayoyo, Wantalong, Bunurong, Beak Beak. Welcome our many friends to Bunurong country. Please look after her.
For me, these places like this, it's the classroom, it's teaching us, and every day changes when you come down to places like the Bass Coast and Phillip Island. It's never the same, the stories are never ending, and the creations are always happening from day to day. For me, walking these sands is recreating and walking in the footsteps of my elders and ancestors from the past. It's about reconnecting, connecting, and the spirits guide you and take you to these places that they've accessed and used for over 40,000 years.
The Bass Coast in particular is very important to us. There's a lot of significant sites to Bunurong people along this coast, and it was a huge resource for us. These cliffs are like our cathedrals. This is our church. When we come here, it is a spiritual place to us, and it connects us to our country and to Mother Earth.
As you walk along these sand dunes and coastlines, you see the evidence of Bunurong people, the stories that they left behind, the midden sites, the hearth features, the artefact scatters. It's a continuous story right around this island and along the Bass Coast Shire. In the summer months, mutton birds were plentiful. They had returned from their annual migration and numbered thousands in the rookeries along the south coast of the island. Phillip Island is probably one of the biggest cultural landscapes that has very little information about it. And the places that we do know of, it holds the stories of our ancestors, and that just gives us a little insight into how Bunurong people lived and enjoyed and loved this part of our lands. We're still here, we haven't changed, and we're still doing cultural practices and telling them Bunurong stories that have been told for thousands and thousands of years. As a traditional custodian of this land, we ask you to look after her, care for her, love her. Woman Jenka.
So everybody, as we do in all our webinars, we start off with a Mentimeter question just to gauge where your level of knowledge is at the beginning of the webinar. So you can either scan the QR code with your phone, or you can jump on to menti.com and enter the code that is on the screen there. So yes, if you're able to jump onto Mentimeter or use the QR code to scan and start inputting your answers, that would be fabulous. And Kobi, also thank you for that brilliant video. It was so powerful to see people speaking on country about the importance of country.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share it. I think it's a really great tiny piece of our story to share and show beautiful Bunurong country that I work and live on every day. And yeah, just how amazing and rich our culture and stories are. Because yeah, there's so much of it to share, and you know, education is such a great space to be able to share this knowledge and, you know, uplift our future leaders, which is really important.
Definitely. And I'm seeing a whole bunch of responses coming through, which is excellent. And it's really fine if you're not very confident at all or very confident. We actually hope that we are able to impart you with a whole lot of knowledge today. So at the end, you can change. But it's something I always reflect on in this space. It's a constant learning journey, and no one is going to know everything. And no one is going to also know a whole lot in one particular time. And I think it's really like a metaphor for life, but particularly in this space, that we gather knowledge as we go along if we're active and open learners as people. So don't feel any kind of shame about not having the knowledge. That's why we're here, right, Kobi?
That's right. You know, we're all on our learning journey, whether you've been doing this for years or you've grown up on country. We're just starting out. You know, everyone is learning something new every day, and we're just trying to help share that and uplift each other, and you know, be able to educate the way that we can, the best that we can, and that's all that we can ask for. And you know, if you have questions, always just make sure you ask, because it's the only way you're going to learn, and it's the only way that we can help give you that information. Because sometimes as First Nations people, we sometimes like have ideas of what people should know, or what we, I guess, think that everyone does know as common sense, and it isn't always the way. So that's why we need, you know, people who don't necessarily know everything or know little pieces of First Nations culture to ask those questions. So then we can learn to be like, hey, this is how we need to learn to teach as well. So it's definitely a two-way street when it comes to the sharing and giving of information.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I was just going to start out by saying thank you for everyone who's come along today. I think it's really important that we can have these spaces to be able to share knowledge and share art and educate. I think it's really important. Myself as a language education worker, I pride myself in being able to share this knowledge in schools. And then I think any way that we can kind of connect with history and art is always a great thing. Obviously, I'm an artist, so I feel a connection with art, but I think art is definitely something, no matter what your background or your creativity is, that you can always connect with it in some way, and you can have those feelings that connect you to whatever those stories are about, which I think is really important. And then I think hearing and understanding people's opinions on art and how they see things is really important, to hear those stories as well. So I'm super excited to speak to you all about a little bit of that. So I wanted to start today by talking a little bit about myself and my journey. Obviously, I'm a Bunurong and Palawa traditional owner. I grew up in Tasmania for the first 18 years of my life. So I grew up on Flinders Island and parts of main Tasmania, so like Launceston and Hobart. So I grew up on Flinders Island, very close to my Palawa culture, especially with my grandparents growing up, who are very involved in the community and just taught me everything that they knew, which the older I get, the more lucky I feel because I've been able to have this information handed down as such a young child. And I think that's really important because not a lot of people actually have that, especially First Nations people, because of displacement and different things like that. So I'm very lucky to be able to have grown up on one of my countries. But then the older I get, I've been very lucky to grow up on and grow as an adult on my other Bunurong country. So I just popped a few little photos in to kind of show you those two places because they're the connections that I have to this land. And I think it's really important to be able to live on both of my countries and move back and forth and be able to understand the culture that I grew up with and then the culture that I learned when I moved away. Because growing up in Tasmania, I always knew I was Bunurong, but it wasn't something that was, I guess, readily available for myself as a First Nations person, because I didn't live on country. I didn't necessarily know a lot of the stories because my Tasmanian stories were handed down. So I moved here 11 years ago, and I was here for a few months and then ended up starting to work for the Land Council, actually. I started out as a heritage rep and did lots of work out in the field, finding our cultural heritage and different things like that, which I think was a really great way to connect to my Bunurong culture in a way that I never really thought I would. Obviously, being the first person potentially for, hundreds to 10 plus thousand, 60 plus thousand years, and being able to touch some of these artifacts that we're finding and gathering that information, I think it's very special to be able to have that connection with your country. And then I think that really did instill the passion that I have for my Bunurong country now, which has kind of evolved into language and art and education and all these other things. But in the slide that I'm showing at the moment, these are my grandparents. So we have Uncle Ronnie Summers and Auntie Diane Summers. They're both my grandparents who I grew up with my entire life and since I was about 2 years old. So my grandfather, he was the Tasmanian songman. So he was one of the first or the last people to kind of carry on our traditional music back in Tasmania. And he was quite successful around Australia with his singing. And he wrote a few books and did this up until he passed on, which was only 3 years ago, but he was very strong in sharing his stories and his music. And I think that creativity really runs through our family, and that's where I kind of get some of the things that I work on now. And then my grandmother, who is very strong in our Tasmanian and Bunurong community, Auntie Diane, she used to write a lot of the music for my grandfather, actually, which was very beautiful, and the connection that they had through music and storytelling, a lot like art and how that's a storytelling. It's just we do it in different ways, I think, is very special. And kind of growing up with that, again, hearing stories in a different way than it would be written down, and hearing it through music and hearing those traditional stories from my grandparents, I think is really special to, just know that and understand that, and the journey that they went on for my childhood was really special to be a part of, and I feel very lucky. So I moved to Melbourne 11 years ago. I started working for the Land Council, as I said before. I just worked for many years. I didn't really do anything creative. I did a lot of art and things like the music and things like that in high school. And then obviously leaving school, it was like, okay, we need to, get some real skills happening. We need to get a job and we need to work towards what we want to be, which at this point, I didn't know what that was going to be. Definitely didn't see myself in an art space as where I am now. So I've jumped fast forward, 10, 15 years. And then I think it would have been the start of COVID. We were all kind of locked up in our houses and having to be creative in different ways so we didn't go crazy or end up murdering a partner or something at home, because that's the person you're spending all your time with. And so I started cooking and doing different things, but then all of a sudden I was like, do you know what? I'm going to go get some canvases. Let's do some art. And so I tried, and I failed miserably. And I was like, okay, maybe art isn't my thing to do. So I left it, and a year passes by. I go on a workshop through my work, the Bunurong Land Council. It was a community workshop to work within digital, which is a First Nations digital brand. And we just did an on-country workshop where it was telling stories from our elders. So Uncle Mick Ed was there, my grandmother, Auntie Diane Summers, Uncle Shane Clark. There was a few other elders. I just can't think of who they were right now off the top of my head. But yeah, we all got together. There was a bunch of community members, and we just shared stories and heard, wisdom from our elders firsthand, which was really special, because it's something really hard to come by these days, I think, unless it's your immediate family. So that was beautiful and unique and an amazing project to be a part of. And then with some of the stories, we kind of created virtual reality animals, and they were that connected with the story. So we ended up creating some animals. My one was a goanna, so we did that. And then some of the girls at In Digital were like, maybe you try to do some digital art. Let's just muck around with that. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So I had a bit of a muck around with the goanna, and everyone really connected with it. It was really random and something I'd never thought I would do. And so that was really nice to be able to create a piece of art. I actually should have probably popped it in here. I didn't even think about it. But I was like, everyone said to me, this could be something that you could do full time. You should really focus on it a bit more, because art obviously speaks to you. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And I was very nervous to do with anything again. I didn't really speak about it that much. And then maybe 5 or 6 months later, I ended up getting a package in the post, and it was these QR codes with the goanna on there, and you scan the QR code and it would generate an app that would open, and your camera would kind of, through your lens, you would see the animal walking around the room that you were in. So it was pretty cool to see this goanna walking around, and then the voice of my grandmother and the story that's attached to that. So that was really special and really moving, and be able to have this. And then maybe a month or so later, I got a call from Michaela, which is the CEO at In Digital. And she's like, Kobi, your artwork's going to Dubai. We've got a expo and we're going to be using the QR codes there. And I was like, what? This is so crazy. But then another part of me that was like, this is amazing. Bunurong stories are going to other countries that I wouldn't have even thought that we would, have our stories where they're, going there. Most of the time when we work with people that are from other countries, it's them coming and visiting us, not the opposite way around. So it was really cool to be at, our stories are going all around the world, and that's so special. And then Michaela was like, you need to get back into art. You need to try something. I'm like, all right. So I don't know. My partner was at work. I just pulled out an iPad and started mucking around and created a piece of artwork, which was actually the artwork on the flyer. It's a pinky and white and greys. So that was the first piece of artwork I officially created, and I was pleasantly surprised. It was very surreal to see something come to life over, a matter of a day or so. And I was like, okay. So I kept creating and making artworks, and it was really fun, and I was loving it. But there was this voice in the back of my head saying, are you a real artist because you're only doing digital art? You failed at those canvases you did the other day, and the other month and whatever, and I just kind of this little nagging voice in the back of my head. But I was like, no, we're going to do it. So I spoke to my partner and I was like, let's buy some canvases and some paints and brushes and we'll go do it. And we went to like Officeworks, probably one of the most expensive places to get like paint supplies from. And I probably spent like hundreds of dollars. And he's like, you remember how Yachtland's canvas turned out? Like just being that little like, I guess, wise person to be like, are you sure this is what you want to do and waste all your money? And so I was like, no, you know, we're going to do it. We're going to work it out. And I pulled out the paints and canvas and created over a couple of days, like 3 canvases that I have in my house now, actually, hanging up with pride. And they were, I guess, one of my most favorite pieces of artworks that I've ever created, because it was something, the first time I ever saw my artistic expression that wasn't contemporary art. It was my traditional art merged with my contemporary art, but it was successful. So that was really nice. You know, with that, with digital art, you can just kind of delete it and, you know, try a different color, or you can backspace something and remove it. So it's easy. So that was really nice to be able to see this come to life. And then I think after that, the first piece of digital art I created got picked up from, I can't remember who it was now, but it was for a rap document. So a reconciliation action plan. So they ended up purchasing the piece of artwork, which was really special. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. So I just kept doing little pieces of artwork and projects, and, you know, someone had messaged me, or I started an Instagram. So then I started posting stuff so people would reach out and was like, hey, can we buy this, or we can get some prints, or whatever it may be. And so that was really cool. And then I think December last year was when it started really getting like big, and I guess my opinion really started changing, being like, this could be something that I work towards as a full-time career. So in December, I got approached, November last year, I got approached by FINA, the World Swimming Championships. They were hosted in Melbourne last year. And so it was swimmers from all around the world, including Australia, doing, you know, their championships. And so they were all televised, and it was really amazing. So I created artworks for their branding, and I did a bunch of different little pieces of artwork internally for them. I ended up presenting the bronze medals for one of the races, and it turned out that Australia come third. So I actually got to present my medals to Australia, which was really special. And then after that, in, I think it was like March this year, Formula One come around, and I ended up working for them. And I think, yes, in one of those photos, you can see me standing in front of it, in front of the car that I ended up painting. It was live art over 4 days, which was really special. And then, you know, that the green computer. So that was a project, actually full circle moment. I got approached by InDigital, and they said, hey, we've got this project where we want to work with Microsoft, and we'd love you to be an artist, a part of it. And so I ended up going to Sydney and creating some artwork with 2 other artists. So it was, I guess, First Nations people. And so it was New Zealand, First Nation, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, like joining up to collaborate on this art piece, which I thought was really special. And I guess a one-of-a-kind project that I'd never seen before, and neither had Microsoft, never done anything like that before. So it was just really special to be able to be a part of that. And then it's just gone crazy since then. I ended up doing MotoGP a couple of months ago. So that was motorbikes in Phillip Island. And over 3 days, painted 6 helmets. And I've just like created smaller pieces of art, which has been really fun. And I think being able to share my story through art and share contemporary Aboriginal art, which I think is really important to share because it really speaks to myself. Obviously, I live in the city of Melbourne, and I don't live traditionally, and merging that together with my traditional elements and then contemporary art was just really special to be able to create that. And then I think because it does have that story within every single piece, but then it is an art style that I've created that's a little different to anyone else's. So it's something that I think a lot of people connect with because it is something that is a bit fresh and they haven't seen before. And so it makes me really proud to be an artist who does that and gives everyone that feeling of, excitement with art. And so I feel super blessed to be able to do what I'm doing today. And, then that's kind of grown into doing stuff like this webinar, and being able to talk about art and education and First Nations culture and history, which is kind of all my little things that I love doing in one bundle, which makes me super happy. And I feel very blessed to be able to do things like this with you guys and educate, because I think it's really important to make sure that we keep growing and educating ourselves every day, especially if you're in the education space, because you guys are the caretakers of our future generations and our leaders, and you guys are the ones that mold our youth, and being able to embed Bunurong culture, but all First Nations culture, into education is so special. My younger sister only finished school 6 years ago, and there was nothing like this, and there was no education apart from colonization, and so I think it's really important to be able to share these stories and have our youth speaking in language depending on what country they're on, and being able to have First Nations workshops and talks and all these things, and they can have it embedded into their education, which is really special. I know
Kobi,
for
I'm
myself.
just going to cut across to you just because I popped up the new Mentimeter. Not to interrupt your beautiful words, but I want to make sure that people know how to log in to the Menti. I'm just keeping a track on time because we're only here till 5. We'd love to talk to you for about 5 hours, but we don't want to do that to you before Christmas. So we were really curious on how you're currently embedding First Peoples art in your classrooms or school. If you're not, it's okay to put no as well. Yeah, growing the knowledge, that's lovely. It's really, it's a spectrum, like we said before. So I think most people have probably finished answering, so we'll pop, a few more coming in as well. And yeah, love this, community art projects, license for collateral, exactly, paying for people for their work, which is so important. Lovely. Thanks, everyone. You can keep adding things as we go along. But yeah, I'm really, really pleased to see that a lot of great stuff is already going on in some schools.
Amazing. So I can't remember exactly where I was at, but it's fine. I can get back onto whatever conversation I was having.
Sorry, I just moved on to I'm just following your slides.
So I think we're moving to the next topic. That's completely fine. I think speaking about this is a big conversation that I have with a lot of schools and a lot of students and a lot of community members and all different people that I work with and speak to on a daily basis. But traditional Aboriginal art versus contemporary Aboriginal art. So on the photos, you'll see on the top, there's more of a contemporary design, and then underneath I'd say is more a traditional design. That's more top end, I think. And I think being able to celebrate both of these things is really important. Understanding that everyone has a different journey. So, my grandparents grew up very traditional. They're in their 70s and 80s, and they had a completely different life to what I had and what my next generation are going to have. And so that will always evolve and grow, as does art, as does language, as does everything, because either the more information that we have, it keeps growing, or the things that influence us keep growing and changing. And I think our art needs to reflect some of these things. Doesn't mean that you have to be stuck in a box and say that you only do traditional art or you only do contemporary art. I think both of those are really important elements to be able to tell stories. But as I said before, I connect with more contemporary art with my traditional symbolism. So then it speaks to myself and I can connect with it. And then that's the story I can share with whoever's seeing the artworks. So we've got a couple of other slides that are coming through, but we'll just flick through those quite quickly. It's just kind of showing different styles of arts. So we've got more traditional style here with a lot of dot painting and things like that. And then this one here again. I'd say this is kind of merging a little bit with traditional and starting to go into contemporary, just with the colours and things like that.
So
But
intricate. Look at all those dots. It's phenomenal.
with the symbolism, it's just, I think the colours are a little more contemporary because they're not those earthy tones and what normally we would see in that traditional art style. So we can flick to the next one. And then again here, depending on where you are in Australia, you will see a lot of this as being traditional art and telling stories, and the colours in this one, very, very traditional. When you think about these colours, you think of the earth and ochres and different things that you would kind of connect traditional painting and customs to. And then with the next one, I've added a few pieces of my artwork in there because you'll see it's completely flipped. It's contemporary. The way I do the backgrounds, kind of like graffiti-esque, and then incorporating my traditional symbolism on top of these, which all very powerful artworks and all tell amazing stories. Just the execution's different. And I think embracing that has been probably one of the greatest things that I've ever done. And I feel like any contemporary Aboriginal artist would feel the same way, because it is something that they're kind of taking their traditional elements and then moulding it into a way that suits them. Which speaks to, I guess, New Age First Nations people, and how, yeah, we evolve. And I think it's really important to be able to embrace both types of art and not discredit one or the other, because sometimes I guess those conversations happen, whether they be within community or outside of that. But art is very subjective and it changes depending on who's looking at it and how they see things and what colours they see and what story they see and things like that. So I think it's really important to, just embrace and share both of those. So within schools, we've done a few schools where we've done projects with both. So we've had more contemporary artists and then we've had traditional artists, and they've done murals and workshops and all different things with students and teachers. And I think just being able to share this knowledge is really important, and to be able to embrace art and education in a school is super amazing. And to be able to work with our students and to be able to get them to understand how to read some of these artworks and work with First Nations people. And, a conversation I've had a few times recently, actually, and it's something that's more common than it's not. But, students or teachers being like, I've never met an Aboriginal person before. So we need to change that. I'm sure that these students and teachers have met a First Nations person before, but depending on the circumstances and how they've met, it's probably not going to come up in conversation unless it is like a workshop or a talk or, something where you're immersing yourself into their space. So I think doing these small things within schools that can make a big difference are really important. So reaching out to artists, working out what country you're on and finding out, whose rap area you're in. So registered Aboriginal party for that group, traditional owner group, and seeing if you can connect up with some artists or some elders or community members that can come and work with the school. Reaching out to parents. Most schools have First Nations students there. So you could even have community members within your school that you can help reach out to, and they might give you some connections or say, hey, yeah, I know Kobi from the Bunurong Land Council. He'd love to come out to the school. Here's his email. Reaching out to all the groups of that country and seeing what you can do is really important, because we need to make sure that we're educating on the country that you're on. It obviously is important to have general First Nations information, but if you can localize that to the country you're on, that's so special and so amazing to be able to have language and things embedded into your school. You know, we've worked with some schools and done naming and things like that, where you can name classrooms and you can add in interpretive signage with an artist who's created artwork with the students potentially. And then you've added in that interpretive signage, significant flora and fauna of the local area, and kind of built on those stories and embedded language into that. And that's all really powerful stuff. I know when I go to a school and I see an acknowledgement plaque and I see a flag, and then I see language and I can speak language in the school, or I see a garden that's specifically Bunurong traditional medicines, and you know, you see things like a yarning circle where the school get together and have meetings and talk and have this element of culture and can sit outside on Bunurong earth and Bunurong country and feel the ground. That's so special. Or whatever country you're on, to be able to walk on that country and feel it. And I think you feel something different when you're able to have these little elements within a school that don't necessarily have to be huge budgets and huge amounts of money. They can be smaller things that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, and it can be really manageable and doable. But it's just, we've got to start with the teachers who want to embed this, because if you guys don't end up doing it, it just gets missed out, and that's not what we want. But I will say we're very lucky in Victoria that, you know, all the new schools that are going, you know, 2024, 25, 26, all that are being built, they're already starting to embed these things into them straight off the mark. So, you know, we've done some projects where it's just been the principal that's been selected for the school, and that's all. And we know the location, and then they're already adding in artists and art and language and gardens and all these things, and starting it straight away. And so that's amazing. But then we need to work with the schools who are established and have been around for a long time, that maybe don't know where to go or don't know where to start. And then this is where you reach out to someone like myself, or you find someone you know, on that country, whether it be a land council or a local community group or a gathering place or whatever it may be, and reach out and ask questions. Because I know 100%, no matter where you are, even if it's not your country, if you work these places, you can always point that person in the right direction, or you can connect them up with someone, because we all know each other and we all yarn and talk. So we can always, yeah, shoot you off over that way and say, hey, here's the number for such and such over at Wurundjeri. Reach out to them and they'll be able to help you. So we'll just always trying to make sure that we have that open communication, and then make it so you guys don't have to try and do the hard yards yourself, because Google is no one's friend. And if you go try and embed language, you're probably, you know, embedding something from Northern Territory or like South Australia or something, because Google's just the worst. It doesn't help unless it's like basic history. So I think it's really important to just, yeah, reach out. But as I said, my details, I work for the Land Council. So, you know, if any of you want to reach out, we can always help out and or point you in the right direction, because that's what we want to do. So this is something that I want to touch on, because I think it's a big thing that kind of happens a lot in schools. Obviously, teachers have great aspirations of wanting to share knowledge. And I think if you don't know a lot about First Nations art, sometimes there is this blanket statement over the whole different types of art. As I said, like contemporary, traditional, Northern Territory, Tasmanian, you know, wherever you are. Sometimes people don't understand that there's like differences between all these things. And I think it's really important to kind of understand that, just so then we can share that correct information. So the artwork you see in front of you, This is more Northern Territory, top end of Australia style artwork, and it is beautiful and we love it. But down in Melbourne, we don't do a lot of dot works, and we don't do some of the animals and things like this within our art traditionally. And so being able to share some of those stories is really important, so then other people can understand, just different styles and what's appropriate for that country. Not that you can't embrace all those types of artworks. I love it when I go into schools and I see Tasmanian art and I see Melbourne, and then I see, top end and just wherever. I think it's really important to embrace all those different places and their art styles. But I think being able to share some of those stories, or even the locations, just so then the students can be like, oh yeah, that's from there. And then, next time they see some art that's similar, they'll be like, oh, that looks like that style, so I reckon that's where that's from. And it just keeps growing from that.
That's popped up a new Menti for people just on that exact topic.
I was like,
yeah.
I'll just stop here.
Well, no, I'm more than happy for you to keep talking, Kobi, because everything you're saying is amazing. But just speaking about that on the different types of art that come from different parts of Australia, I'm just really curious to know if people are aware of any traditional art sites in Victoria. I think what often the same as what you were saying before, Kobi, that a lot of people associate First Peoples art with art from the Northern Territory, which it undoubtedly is, but there's a real variety of art, as there are a real variety of locations as well. I'm not sure if there's an issue with the Menti, because we've just got one vote so far on this. So if anyone else wants to grab their camera of their phone and scan the QR code, or go to menti.com, or just pop something in the chat if you're having trouble accessing it. Sometimes there is a little bit of a lag that is completely out of our hands with Mentimeter. Technology is our friend and our enemy also at the same time. Poppy, have we got anything that the chat that people are having issues with the Mentimeter? Yep. No? Okay. It doesn't matter. But if you do know of any sites in Victoria where there is art, then feel free to also pop that in the chat. I think one thing that was in the news recently that Kobi and I were discussing the other day is the artwork in the Grampians, which has recently was a really popular climbing spot for people, and artwork was getting damaged, and a lot of people weren't aware of the fact that it existed. So that's something that you can Google if you need to.
Yeah, I think that actually
refreshed.
a good little conversation there, because it was a conversation we had the other day. But I think there is a part of us as First Nations people to protect our culture and community. Obviously, because of, places like Uluru, how that's, the way that's looked after now compared to what it was in the past. The Grampians, with even sites like shell middens and stuff like that that are potentially ruined on beaches because of people, driving their cars and whatever it may be. And obviously, everyone's entitled to do whatever sport and whatever extracurricular activity they want to do. But then it's working out how we can be respectful in some of these sacred places, because they are important to the groups that it's their country. And sometimes these might be the last of these places. And we need to look after those and hold them close and make sure that we can share this knowledge with our next generations, because I know a lot of us in my community, so Bunurong and Palawa, we lost a lot of our culture and knowledge. And then we had to spend years and generations upon generations trying to refine this. And so that's why I'm a language and education officer, because our language was lost. And then I have to spend time now as a full-time job, refining that, just so I can empower our community to be able to be fluent speakers again. And it's really empowering work. But on the other hand, it's really sad that we have to do this and that we don't have that knowledge handed down to us. And so we don't want to be back at square one again with our sites, because they are sacred and important, and they're tens of thousands of years old. And you know, it's sad that sometimes First Nations culture and heritage aren't looked at like a Eiffel Tower or a pyramid or something that's in your face, and that everyone respects and knows that that's something special to those people. And so that's why we work really hard to sometimes keep these sites hush hush and don't share this knowledge with people. And then sometimes that's why we do, I guess, PowerPoints and different presentations and things like that. So we can still share that knowledge, but we're not giving up the locations of these places. And we're trying to just, keep them tight to our community so we can still enjoy them. And we can have traditional ceremonies and things that we would always have from generation to generation in these places, because it's really sacred to us. Or stories like, petroglyphs, so rock carvings and different things like that. They could be stories generations old, even older, that we want to share with our next generation. So it's really important to try and share knowledge, but then protect it at the same time. But it's definitely a hard balancing act to try and work out how we move forward with that and do that. So we can move to the next slide. That's okay. Thank you. So this one, storytelling and why it's important. Obviously, storytelling in First Nations culture, art, music, dance, they were our storytelling and oral history, oral stories. These are the way we told our stories. These are the way that we shared our knowledge. We didn't have dictionaries and we didn't have books that we'd write everything down in. We'd do art and we'd dance and we'd sing and we'd speak and tell our stories to our next generation. And it's really important that we keep doing this. Obviously, we've added this extra layer so then we can back ourselves up. Worst case scenario, if we got back to square one and lost all our history again, we've got records of it now where we've started collecting that to be like, okay, I'll grab my grandmother's stories and I'll do a project like that in digital project with her story on a QR code. Now we've got that for the rest of our lives and for generations to come, and we can always share that. So storytelling is something that we all connect with. It's something that you guys connect with when you hear these stories or you see these stories. And I think every First Nations person is creative in telling stories and sharing knowledge that way, because it's just ingrained and inbuilt inside us. And so that's why obviously I connect really well with art. And I think sharing art stories and my cultural knowledge and even my contemporary new age life through art and stories is really important, because one day we're going to look back and all the stuff that we're doing, whether it's my art or it's the teaching that you guys did, we're going to look back and that's going to be our past and our history that we're going to share one day. And it's really important to make sure that we keep doing that. And then as you as teachers, sharing that knowledge with our students, because we want them to be just the strongest, most powerful people that they can be, and be the smartest, most understanding people because of the multicultural society that we live in, and uplifting all cultures, whether they be First Nations or not, is really important. Can we move to the next slide, if that's okay?
And I'll just let we've got about 10 minutes remaining.
Yeah. So this is a big one that I always talk about, because it is something that there's a few little stories attached to this one as well. But art traditions. So for me, mine are handed down through my family, through stories, through art, from my elders that they've shared with me. Some has been through history books and history that we have, where then I can have a look at some of these symbols and understand what they meant. And then incorporating that into my art style. But then we have art traditions that, like my uncle, he is Bunurong Palawa man. He grew up in Tasmania. He's never really lived in Melbourne, but he's lived most of his adult life in Broome. And so he worked really closely with the community in Broome and did a lot of work in mental health and things like that, which is really empowering and amazing. But then, because he got so close to the elders there, they felt a connection with him. And so what they did was they shared their art traditions with him and gave him permission to be able to create art in their style because they accepted him as one of their community members. Now, this doesn't happen often. This is a really special thing to happen. And he feels really lucky to be able to create art like that, because then, you know, he's got his Tasmanian style, his Bunurong style, and then he's got this new style that's been kind of gifted to him, which is really special. And so this is how we end up getting, I guess, merge different styles of art, which is really amazing, and it tells the story of that artist. And for myself, mine's Tasmanian and Bunurong mixed together with contemporary. My uncle's is what I just said before, kind of those three meshed together. But when he's doing specific artwork for Bunurong country, he might have touches of Broome and maybe a little bit of Tasmania, but it mostly focuses on Bunurong because it's respectful to that country. And so that's a really good lesson I've learnt from him, because that's how I create my art now as well. And it's really important to remember these things, because we're actually dealing with something in Tasmania currently where we've had a Tasmanian Aboriginal artist who created artwork for a basketball team down there, and it's on their jerseys. And it was focused a lot on dot art, which isn't necessarily Tasmanian. It's more mainland Australia. So that there was, I guess, a bit of an uproar when it come to the artwork that was selected and it being promoted as Tasmanian art. And so that's where these little things come in. And that's why we try to give you guys the tools, whether it be links or it might be connections like myself, to be able to touch base and be like, hey, how do I deal with this? Maybe the school's doing a jersey or a levers jumper or something like that. And you're like, we want to create art. And it's working out how to do that. But what this basketball team missed out on was having that First Nations voice within that. So they had a committee. They didn't have one First Nations person in there. And this really big part of this whole conversation was missed out because First Nations voices weren't in a conversation that was focused around First Nations art. And that is one of the most important things that I hope you all walk away with today, is that if you ever have ideas of wanting to do something, make sure that we have First Nations voices, whether it be a parent, a First Nations teacher, someone from a land council, local group, whoever it may be. Make sure we have that lens put over there, because we need to make sure that we're being culturally safe in these places and making sure that First Nations voices are heard within art and education spaces, because these are two really big spaces that need to be correct. Art is something that everyone sees, whether it be public art or within a school or whatever. And then same with education. And we need to make sure that we're just crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's when it comes to projects like this. And then nothing ever comes back on you guys as teachers. And then, you have a happy community because you've consulted. And they're like, those teachers at that school were so amazing because they consulted with us straight up. There was nothing, we didn't have to ask about it. We didn't have to get upset about it. And it was all done culturally safely, and that's where it goes into the next slide about cultural safety and why it's important. Because we want to make sure that our families and community feel like they can have their voice heard, for one, because our voices were taken away from us for such a long time. It's so important to make sure that we still have them today. And then in education, I think it's really important because for many years, education spaces were one of the biggest places. I think it's like hospitals and schools were one of the biggest places where our children were displaced. And so making sure that we have that cultural lens and that cultural safety within these spaces is so important, because then when you have a cultural safe space, you will end up having parents and students who identify because they don't feel worried to identify. And then you have students and parents that share knowledge with you as a school because they feel comfortable to be able to do so. And then you have culturally safe information that's going out to non-Indigenous students and parents and teachers. And it's just this whole thing that works so well when it happens. But again, it goes back to those First Nation voices. They need to be in these spaces so that you can be culturally safe. And then it's just this working group of people who are just uplifting and making it stronger and stronger every day because of the work that they're all putting in and doing. And it pays off because when I come visit a school as the language and education officer, I'm blown away by some of the stuff you teachers do. You are so creative, and the way that you embed culture and knowledge is amazing. And if you can have that voice from someone, whether it be myself or an elder or whoever in your communities, it's so important to make sure that we keep uplifting and doing that, because then we just build the best Australia that we can have, the best Melbourne that we can have, because we have just the smartest, most knowledgeable people, and it keeps growing from there. And then you get to a point where you're like, I need to learn more now because I know all the step one stuff, now let's uplift my knowledge and let's grow it even more. Let's do cultural awareness and let's do other things with schools because it's so important to be able to do this stuff. And then, you look back 10 years later and you have a wealth of knowledge that you can then share with other students and teachers, and it keeps growing from there. And, myself, I'm a Bunurong person, Palawa man who has grown up on country. I still learn every day. I still learn about my culture. And so there's no point where you get to somewhere where you just stop learning. Like there's no more. There's always stuff to learn. And if you are at a point where you just can't find something, again, that's where you reach out to these First Nations groups, community members, whoever it may be, because they'll point you in the right direction or give you the tools that you need. And it's so important.
Zip too quick there, sorry.
That's all right.
We have only a couple of minutes though, and I'd love to get people's opinions. So Kobi, keep talking, but if people want to just quickly scan the Menti as you listen to Kobi's last words and complete this last survey, that would be amazing.
Yeah, and I think just cultural safety, how we can, it's the last slide, is how can you work better to create this within education? And I think just saying all the things I just said, that is it. Making sure that we're building it into curriculum, whether it is, again, you reach out to your First Nations group, whether it be a land council, co-op, whatever it may be, but you can get all this information or you can work together. I'm working with a few schools at the moment just to create some of these education packs. So we're doing one for primary, one for secondary, and one for early childhood. We're working with 3 different schools and they're kind of being the guinea pigs for it. And what we're going to do is when we've created this, it's going to be a Bunurong cultural studies pretty much, and it'll be for every single group from pre-K to year 12, and we're going to be able to share these with all the schools, and that'll be your new starting point. But if we're not at that point where we've finished that, you can always reach out and say, hey, we'd love to add this into something. How can we do it? And I welcome all the emails and phone calls that you guys need, because we're there to help you. And we always want to work together to just build stronger knowledge for our communities. And then this work it always builds my knowledge up as well. So it's not just me helping you, it's you guys helping us as well.
I'll just say too that with every webinar we do send out a resource pack, and this is being compiled by us with input from Kobi as well. So it includes lesson plans, a whole lot of links to First Nations artists in Victoria, and also some self-education stuff. So I noticed a few people said they didn't really feel they'd learned so much. It's such a short amount of time, 1 hour, to absorb everything. So we do provide the extra resource packs for you to go and do some deeper learning after the webinar, because it's so, like Kobi has said throughout, it's so much to learn and we don't need to know everything at once. So hopefully the resource pack can help you to increase your knowledge and confidence in this space. And most elders and First Peoples that I speak to say try rather than being frozen. It's better to make a mistake and find out that you've made a mistake than to not try at all, because often you haven't made the mistake. But if you freeze and a bit filled with fear to progress the work in this space, then we don't go anywhere, right, Kobi?
That's exactly right.
Mm.
And
So,
yeah, like,
yeah. So we're at 5. We're at 5 o'clock. Final words, Kobi.
no, thank you. I appreciate everyone coming along. I hope that you all got something from this today. And I hope, to hear from some of you guys reaching out and wanting some advice, or, wanting to do some workshops and things like that. I'm open to it, and I hope that you all can just reach out whenever you feel like it, because that's all we want.
Thank you so much, Kobi. We really, really appreciate you sharing both your artwork and your knowledge with all of us in this space. So a big thank you from us at RecVic, and thank you on behalf of everyone who attended as well.
No, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Bye now.
Bye.